Hey guys, welcome to episode 42, I believe, of the Urban Cred podcast. Today we have an interesting kind of interview for you guys. It is with Kyle Ogilvie. Kyle here is Marketing Director of Matador. He's been through many different brands relating to travel, products, and of course, in the marketing aspect of it all. So today we have him here. If you could just give us an introduction and welcome to the show.
Yeah, Edward, thanks for having me. So my name's Kyle Ogilvie. So I have been with Matador for about 6 months. So I started at the time of this recording, 6 months, I suppose. Started in January of 2024. Prior to that, you mentioned I was with a few other brands. So I've worked on the product side, doing kind of product-based marketing. So I was at Kelty for a few years, promoting backpacks and camping and these things. And then I was in the ski industry for about 8 years prior to that. So I worked for Vail Resorts for a while doing marketing, and then a few other ski brands from there. And then prior to that, I was kind of in the high-tech space. So I kind of started my first job out of college was with Hewlett Packard. So kind of have some high tech background in there as well, but ultimately decided to kind of pursue my passions, for the outdoors and for travel and all those things. So that's, after a 16-year career thus far, I find myself with Matador doing adventure travel.
Wow, that switch between HP and just travel in general. How did that happen? You're like first in like tech and like printers and all that stuff, and now I feel like completely different because now travel is just like more hands-on or adventurous, at least on the front.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think everybody has maybe one of these experiences in their life where they get into something and they realize that maybe they learn more about what they don't want to do more than what they do want to do. So, nothing against, Hewlett Packard at the time, but it was just, I was kind of doing marketing, selling servers, productivity, and, B2B kind of marketing, which wasn't incredibly sexy. It wasn't incredibly interesting, for the most part. But what I really got excited about was the brand marketing. So I kept asking my boss, who is in charge of the brand marketing pieces? And how do I get more involved in that? That was the stuff that was really interesting to me. So that's, once you kind of pick up on these things, that kind of tends to shape your career from there. So, I mean, I did that for, a few years after college and, essentially haven't looked back. I was like, this is, pursuing the outdoors and travel is definitely my passion. And I've always been the type of person that aligns their professional world with their kind of personal passions. So, yeah, no regrets. Absolutely not.
Wow, yeah. And before we go further into the interview, I'd like to give the listeners a kind of quick overview of like the brand that you work with, Matador. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening probably do know what and where Matador has come from, but just in case, give us a little bit of a TLDR on what that's all about.
Sure. Yeah. So Matador is an adventure travel gear company. So we like to say we make high performance travel equipment. So we make packable packs, we make accessories, and we make these kind of larger sort of one bag global travel packs as well. So the brand has been around for about 10 years. So we're based here in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm sitting at now. And kind of a little bit of the history of the brand. So our founder, Chris Clearman, was kind of an OG at GoPro, and started building these products kind of on the side, doing this kind of moonlighting gig. Essentially, he would ride his motorcycle to work every day. And then, as you do in San Francisco, you kind of hang out in parks at lunch, after work, these kinds of things. And he never had like a dry place to sit because he would always take his motorcycle. His friends had blankets and all these things. So one day he just said, I'm going to build a blanket, and ended up building a blanket that folds up basically the size of a wallet so he can put it into his motorcycle. And he would pull that out during, these kind of park hangouts. And the first one was red. And he would kind of unfold this thing and kind of, flip it out into the air. and his friends would say, "Oh, you look like a Matador when you do that." So
Mm.
that's kind of where the name came from. So that first flagship product was this kind of foldable, packable blanket. And then from there, we made a bunch of other accessories, eventually made packable bags, and then kind of scaled up the business over the last 10 years. And we introduced kind of our first line of these larger scale global travel packs about a year and a half ago.
Wow. And this Matador has been known for like these travel accessories that sort of resemble or at least take inspiration from outdoor gear, but
Yeah.
actually kind of flips it on its head on how it's perceived and how it's being used. How does that how do you balance that from being too much or too kind of focused for the outdoor crowd, like because sometimes when people come to Urban Cred and they shop Matador stuff, they're like, oh, is this like for mountain climbing, is this for outdoor gear, and then other people just kind of figure it out. It's like, oh, this is definitely like, this carabiner, for example, it's got a lock, it's for travel, I could definitely use it like that, or this or that. I could figure like a million ways to use it. So how do you balance that on your end?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. What the product you're talking about is the best example, right? So it's this. We make this locking carabiner called the Beta Lock. So that came out in August of last year. So the whole idea of this thing is, we're inspired by the outdoor industry. We're in Boulder, Colorado, our backyard. We have mountains, hiking trails, 5 minutes from the office. So we're inspired by this gear. But how do you take this kind of design ethos, like outdoor exploration, all this other stuff that we kind of expose ourselves to? How do you take those processes and products and design? How do you translate that to travel gear that typically tends to be a bit more uninspired? It's completely function, no real kind of fashion or no real design elements to it. How do we kind of merge these two things to take what was historically kind of a boring travel lock? How do we take that and kind of elevate it to make it a little bit more interesting, a bit more inspired, a bit more dynamic? So that was kind of the goal with the Beta Lock, is how do we take and how do we kind of do double duty with it a little bit too, where a travel lock just kind of sits on your pack and it's just doesn't do anything until you need it, right? But if we could somehow merge that with a carabiner, we use carabiners, when we travel, when we hike, all these things. If we could just take that and make, some sort of travel lock integration with this thing, then you always have a carabiner on you. And then if you need it, you always have a locking carabiner with you for a travel scenario. So that's kind of both things. It's like your question was, how do we balance it, right? And I think, it's taking those design inspirations from the outdoor industry, but also, making it, we're just, very basically trying to make this stuff cool, right? Like we're trying to take these travel locks, make them more interesting, make them cool, make them, make people excited about these products that historically just maybe haven't had an exciting story to tell.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just like the choice of colors, it may not, people may not like think of that, but I feel like the choice of colors make it a little bit more bolder and a little bit more attractive, yeah, especially to like the the male audience, but not necessarily just for them.
Yep. Yeah. So we made the Beta Lock in 7 different colors, right? So that third function is you can put it on your bag, and then if you decide to check your bag and it's coming around the carousel, you can say, oh yeah, there's my Matador bag with the gold carabiner, right? Now I know that one's mine. So you can use it as kind of a luggage differentiator when you're trying to find your bag. So yeah, I think color is, one of those, sort of simple ways that you can kind of show off your own personality a little bit too. Maybe you gravitate toward the black one. Maybe we kind of make this muted purple color. Maybe, that gets someone excited. So there's a lot of options.
Yeah.
We use color.
And like, I know, so it's tough because sometimes from a product design point of view, there are times where you create a line of product, you're the lead, right? You're in the market, you're like, oh, this is great, people love it. But sometimes you're slow to the punch in, or not even slow, but like someone else did something with a product that, oh, that's legit, or that's amazing. I wish we thought of that. Are there any brands or products out there that your team was like, oh wow, how come we didn't think of that?
Mm, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there's so many brands. The era that we kind of found ourselves in is outdoor companies, traditionally outdoor focused brands, have now recognized in this kind of post COVID era that travel is kind of the next frontier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have brands like Osprey and Gregory, and even some of the Patagonias, these other brands that people think of them as historically kind of one way, right? They're like outdoor focused, they're hiking packs, they're backpacking packs, these kinds of things. But they've recognized this opportunity with travel, right? That folks want to, especially like the like younger millennials, Gen Z, they don't want these big clunky roller bags, right? They want an efficient kind of one pack on their back and go sort of travel scenario, right? They don't want to be lugging these roller bags through like a cobblestone street in like Cinque Terre. They want to take it all on their back super efficiently, right? So that's definitely the current space that we find ourselves in, right? And I think there's brands, I think Peak Design, we take a lot of inspiration from in particular. Just kind of generally holistically, they're a bit more focused on specific kind of outdoor pursuits like photography and these kinds of things. There's another trend that we've seen with Peak Designs as well. Thule is doing a little bit of this, where they're making a bit more hard. They're packs, but they have structure to them. They're a bit more rigid in their design, but still allowing for a little bit of flexibility. So I think I can't fully speak for our design team, but I would say that they probably take inspiration from some of those a little bit more rigid designs, right? Because they look super elegant on a shelf. They look great on your pack while you're walking through the airport, those kinds of things. So I would say, there's not like a specific product that I would call out, but certainly there's other brands in the space that have done very well. Like I will say the Patagonia Black Hole Bag. We don't make anything quite like that, but that if you pay attention at any airport, especially Denver International Airport near us, you see that Patagonia Black Hole Bag everywhere, right? So, what is it about that gets folks so excited, right? Is it the color? Is it the durability? Is it pocketry? All those kinds of things. So that's something that we think a lot about, right? Where what are consumers gravitating toward, and how can we take inspiration from some of these products that have done quite well. So yeah, there's kind of a lot of factors there, but yeah, there's a lot of things to be inspired by in the travel and outdoor space.
Absolutely. And back to you then. We spoke briefly about your journey to entering kind of the travel market and the product kind of sector of that travel market. Is how did you enter Matador like 6 months ago? Was it like a tip off? Were you looking for change? Were you kind of, I don't know, scouted, or did you like punch a bear and then the founder was like, "Oh, that's amazing. I love you." How was that? Like,
yeah. I wish that was the case. That would make for a way better story.
Right.
So I was looking for a new opportunity, and what's interesting, and I think I'll get a little bit specific about it, but I think it's interesting for folks to understand, because there's many ways to find a new job, right? So I saw a job posting. I don't remember where at this point, but I saw a job posting on Indeed or LinkedIn or somewhere for what was at the time essentially a paid media marketing role. And I said I could do that. I've managed agencies that have done paid media. This is a role that I could be familiar with. So I applied, and then about a week later, Chris Clearman. This was in December of 2023. So Chris Clearman emails me back and says, "Hey, love your resume. You have a lot of experience in the outdoor space. And I think you might be a good fit for this. However, I'm looking to potentially reorganize the team, and you may be a better fit for a role that I'm kind of imagining. Do you want to talk?" So I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So in that December, so we got on the phone. So Chris was in Sayulita, Mexico at the time, doing we do a thing called December Away, or Remote December here, where everybody kind of travels during the month of December to test gear and, these kinds of things. So Chris was in Sayulita. So, I hopped on a Zoom with him, and, he was like, hey, your resume is definitely something we're interested in, but that paid media role, maybe it could evolve, and we could kind of build out this new marketing director role, which had previously wasn't a part of the team. So essentially we had a great conversation. We kind of spitballed on team structure and what it could look like going forward with this new role, and how it would all kind of function together, and just had a really great connection. I think that's sometimes the most, and I would say a non-traditional kind of path to a new job. But as I have friends out there, even now, that are looking for new roles, it's kind of like you have to find these little connections, right? You have to find friends of friends, and make these connections using your network, and you never know where this stuff's going to kind of go. So Chris and he invited me into the office in January. The first part, got to meet the team. We brainstormed more about the future of the brand. It just seemed like a really, really great fit overall. So so then I kind of started a few weeks later. So I think there's a lot to be said about leveraging your network and just being open to new opportunities in kind of non-traditional ways versus just the applying through some kind of faceless job portal that you might just get lost in the shuffle of a larger company. But everything worked out quite well, and I'm very fortunate that the timing was just very serendipitous for me to find it.
Now, there's some listeners out there who often comment about not being confident enough in taking a role at a sector that they're not kind of familiar with. So, for example, let's take you, for example. This is not exactly how it went for you, but let's say Bob here worked at HP, but he wants to change a pace. There's a role in another, like Matador, for example, but he's like a little nervous. He's self-doubting himself. What kind of advice would you give him? Like, would you tell him just to kind of go for it, get some more, like kind of work your way up from the bottom in that kind of market area, get some more experience? What does that look like?
Yeah, you always go for it. That's the short answer. You always go for it. You have very little to lose, right? Other than, a little bit of your pride if you don't get a role, right? But I think, there's always value in any interview process. Even if you don't get the job, you can take, people ask good questions, and you can take these little pieces, these learnings from each interview, and tweak your approach and apply that to the next interview scenario. So even if it doesn't go well, there's so much to learn, right? Like, I think it's a little cheesy, but like everything in life is a learning opportunity if you're open to it, right? I think nothing is a failure. People have, stated that a million different ways in the past, but there's so much opportunity to learn and to grow and to evolve before you find that job. But I think the other thing is everybody's background is valuable, right? So I learned all of these different lessons at HP selling servers that, but maybe I can't take that direct knowledge. So I went to Vail Resorts after my time at Hewlett Packard, right? So I didn't take those like, oh, I know how to sell a server, I'm going to apply this to, and at that time, the ski industry. But it was, hey, I know how to use technology to do marketing, right? I know how to use data to tell a story, both internally, externally. What are the similarities between these roles, right? They were both marketing positions. So how do you take that? I mean, in every interview, there's a little bit of a spin to it, right? But how do you take your background, even if it's indirect, and apply it to a new industry, right? And I think a lot of brands, a lot of businesses find value in new perspectives, right? Like, it's great when you have an industry veteran that can join the team and they just can plug and play and they can dive right in, and they said, yep, I've worked for a travel brand before. I know how to do this. Let's hit the ground running. But there's also a lot of value in a new perspective and saying, yeah, you didn't come from this industry, but what perspective can you bring that's unique and new that the team doesn't currently have, right? Because you're always going to be a part of a team. So how can you kind of plug in to the skill set that's maybe lacking on that team? So maybe your background in high tech is valuable in a different industry. Maybe your background in medical, is valuable to another industry. And I would say that everybody's background, no matter what it is valuable to whatever that next piece of their career is. You just have to kind of be conscious and think about, what that employer is looking for.
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel the same. I think from our point of view, I think because even like as experts, we've been in the kind of game for so long, you're kind of like stuck in your ways sometimes, even without knowing it. So having like outside insight from a different point of view is actually super valuable for us, rather than just hiring someone who's also been in there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's valuable perspectives in both, but someone with fresh eyes just sees things that you can't see. So I think a lot of value, and everybody. The big takeaway: everybody should go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna send my kid. He's 3. He's got perspective.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, so young.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so now let's switch to let's switch back to Matador here.
Sure.
You are a marketing director, obviously. So let's get into the nitty gritty of your marketing secrets. The one question that I've always had, and it's perfect that you're in that kind of area, is that the world is a big place. There are different people, there are different cultures, and then there are different viewpoints on how products should be and how it should be marketed. I'd like to say that Matador has reached a kind of a worldwide appeal. There are people around the world who know Matador, and while there are always someone who doesn't know about the products, that's kind of what we achieve. We kind of try to kind of push for more people to see us. Like, how do you approach so many different markets around the world when they're so different from each other?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and it's I will tell you, it's not an easy thing to answer. But I will say that about a third of our business comes from outside of the U.S. So again, we've been around for 10 years. We found ourselves, relatively successful in the U.S. And then, for the past few years, that business, particularly our wholesale business, has grown pretty exponentially outside of the U.S. So, we see, folks from Singapore and London and Tokyo on the website daily, right? So these are the things that I look at all the time, right? So I think that's really interesting to me in particular, very satisfying to me. I think, for whatever reason, folks have gravitated to, this Colorado-based, adventure travel brand, making kind of elevated performance travel equipment. But to answer your question more directly, I think it's all about finding strategic partners that know the local marketplace, right? So I'm here in Colorado. I've lived in Colorado almost 20 years, lived in the U.S. my whole life. I will be the first one to tell you that I don't understand, if we take, Tokyo, right? I don't understand the Japanese marketplace as well as the U.S. Like there's all these subtleties, and I can learn about it and study it, but unless you're kind of in it and really understand the depth of it, I can't pretend to know that. So what we do is typically work with local distributors, right? So that is the most important piece. So if we're talking wholesale in particular, it's finding a wholesale partner that knows the marketplace, that is excited to sell your product, and directly and indirectly able to translate that to their local market, right? So with Japan, for example, so they maintain their own Matador website, right? So we send them assets, we send them copy, we kind of educate them, a couple times a year on, here's the brand, here's the product, all these things. And then they're able to grab the bits and pieces that work for their market and either directly or kind of indirectly translate that, that language, that aesthetic, the style, all the things that go with that, they're able to translate that for their local market. So we allow them, there's some guardrails that are kind of put into place there, as to maintain brand integrity and all these things. But we certainly allow them, I would say, more flexibility than maybe other brands to be able to tell the Matador story in a local context. So our partners, A&F is the name of our distribution partner in Japan. They tell the Matador story quite well. And then we have distribution partners, in Europe, the UK, other places around the globe. So we kind of like look at them. I think A&F in Japan is doing it quite well. They're definitely like a great example of how to execute a relationship like that extremely well. And we're actually getting ready to set up a new UK distributor using that kind of model, right? We allow them to run their own Instagram platforms, which, takes a little bit of oversight and direction initially, but then we provide them assets and content, and we say, here you go, have at it. Tell the Matador story, to your audience in, London or whatever it's going to be. So I think, to sum it all up, I think it's about finding a partner who you trust, who understands your brand, who you can have kind of a two-way communication with. And, if you have that, you have everything you need, I think, to be successful internationally.
Gotcha. Interesting. So then it's the most important thing is just to find the right partner to kind of that understands you, that is excited, and that just loves your brand just as much as you love it. Right. I see. Yeah. Great. I mean, I think that's a great approach, because you'll never, no matter how much you study or like kind of look into it, you won't beat the actual people who kind of live there, who kind of live the culture themselves.
Yeah. Yep. And there's something to be said about, folks around the world gravitating to a U.S. based brand. There's, a certain kind of cachet that exists in, the outdoor travel space. Colorado has this kind of, high level kind of meaning in some folks' minds around the world. But you still have to translate that to a local. So I think, very important.
Yeah. So then it's interesting because you're still, so you went from tech ski to kind of this Matador travel hybrid business. How is product, the pipeline like for designing products for you guys? Does it take like a year to do? Is it like you pop out like 50 different sketches to kind of narrow it down to 3? Do you have to kill your baby? Like, how does it you have to compete with the next guy by playing poker? Like, my design is better. Like, how does that look like?
Yeah. It's funny. I was walking the dog this morning and I was like mentally preparing to chat with you. And that was one of the questions that I was like, I wonder if Edward would ask this one. So I've been thinking about it today. And I mean, there's not like one direct answer, but I would tell you that in most brands, once you hit most product-based companies of a certain scale, once you hit that scale, there's sort of this default development cycle. Not everybody does this, but by and large, this is kind of the development cycle that a lot of brands execute around. And that's typically this kind of 3-year process where, you'll come up with an idea, you develop CADs, you develop prototypes, you test your prototypes, you refine all these kinds of things. Then you get this kind of golden sample. Then you educate, your marketing team on this product. Then you educate your sales team on this product. Then you educate your distributors on this product. And then it kind of evolves from there. And then you start, doing production orders. And then, your product is, air shipped or comes over on a boat. And a few months later, it's on the shelf. So that whole process, beginning to end, can take about 3 years. That's probably the average. development cycle for any given product. At least when you talk about the outdoor space, when you talk about the travel goods space, I would say too. But so Matador kind of operates a bit on this hybrid cycle where so that 3-year cycle, typically folks will call that retail aligned.
All
So
right.
when you want to align with like an REI or any other, folks like you guys, when you want to align with kind of a wholesale launch schedule, that 3-year cycle is very beneficial, right? Because so right now we're talking to folks about product for next year, right? So
Mhm.
we're a full year ahead. And typically consumers won't see these products that we're talking about to wholesalers until spring of next year. So I would say that's typically how that works, that 3-year cycle. Matador is fortunate enough, this is my first time I've worked at a company like this. It is very unique. We have another schedule that's essentially a fast schedule, a fast launch schedule. So we can take a product from an idea to prototype, to design, to prototype, to orders, to execution, to in-store, and by in-store, I mean e-com on our website, in as little as 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Which is 6 months still sounds like a long time, but I promise you that is like breakneck speed product development. It is when I first showed up here and I said, wait, you guys, you're going to bring this product to market in 6 months. It absolutely blew my mind. I cannot believe that it's possible.
Right.
But when you have a team of super smart folks, super motivated folks, folks that, I mean, we literally have a design studio, like we have a shop. My desk is literally right next to our prototype shop. And they're in there selling bags, and they say, hey, what do you think about the zipper? Is anyone going on a trip? Can you test out this pack? You come back on Monday and you say, yeah, that zipper is not going to work. We need to rethink it. Right.
Right.
And that could take like a month just to change like that, because you would send, during that 3-year kind of process, during the traditional product development cycle, you would have to test a product, and then you send all these notes back to your manufacturing partners, mostly overseas is where that stuff is manufactured. And that could take months to get that stuff back. So we are able to kind of do this fast development cycle because we can prototype stuff in the office. Folks are traveling, constantly, so we can test stuff in real world travel scenarios and then come back and iterate on those designs very, very quickly. So, I would say that is pretty impressive. And I would say, so typically, talking about the design process, right? So we have folks that kind of specialize in hard goods. So this is like, hard-sided, the plastics, the aluminums, the stuff that's going to kind of has those harder materials. We have designers that are focused on hard goods, and then we have designers that are focused on soft goods. And then we kind of have a mix of folks that kind of bounce around. So that's another key focus is you get folks that are kind of specialized in those areas, and then they can kind of really run with those. So the benefit is Chris Clearman, like I mentioned, our founder, he is a product designer by trade, by training. That is where his true passions are. So he'll actually develop a lot of our products by hand himself, right? And the Beta Lock that I mentioned, the travel carabiner, he literally made that product from the ground up. He designed the key, the locking mechanism, kind of everything on this kind of fast track cycle. So that's the advantage. And then we'll kind of, we'll come up with ideas. We'll kind of test them against the market. Is there an opportunity in the marketplace for a product like this? If so, what is the price point? Can we hit those price targets, right? Sometimes you see, products exist in the marketplace, but they're not making one that's interesting, or they're making one that's expensive, or they're making one that's cheap and not durable. Like, how can we make a product that differentiates ourselves in that space? So yeah, we'll do these like deep dive market analysis analyses with the whole team. We do these kind of go meetings together with everybody, right? So our operations team will get involved, our marketing team will get involved, my team, creative team, photography, essentially everybody, every team and every function is represented at these meetings saying, do we think we can do that, right? Is it viable? Is this how we're going to prioritize our time? Is this product a go? Is it a no-go? So I feel like that's somewhat unique too, where the entire team is kind of marching in the same direction to kind of execute a product. And a lot of times we're incredibly excited about these products ourselves. I mean, we're travelers, right? So we're like, oh, we're making that. I want one of those, right? So that motivates me to bring this thing to the market even quicker. So yeah, it's a really fun process to be involved in. I think at a lot of bigger brands, these functions are very disparate, right? So there's a product team. They sit by themselves and kind of talk to themselves for the most part. There's a sales team. They sit by themselves and they're kind of focused on their world. There's a design team, right? And yeah, they all talk here and there, but they all kind of live in their own orbits. Where Matador, because we're a small sort of tight knit team, we're able to kind of sit down together and kind of have these conversations, daily versus, I've done these like once a quarter where you check in with these other teams, and it's just, the communication is maybe a lot less efficient in those scenarios. So, there's a lot of advantages to sitting next to the product design team. And if they have a cat on their screen, I'm like, ooh, what's that? And then, well in advance, I start thinking about, okay, how are we going to tell the story of this product? That in other roles, I wouldn't see that for another, 6 months or 8 months. So a lot of advantages to that sort of like communal approach to product design.
Yeah, I think it's something he said, like a difference between not necessarily like a smaller company, but like a more company that's built around working in conjunction with each other rather than like a larger, like multi whatever company that's owned by another company where they have like a lot of levels of like or not levels but like walls, I would say, to let you see what the other team is kind of working on. You guys like live practically right next to each other, whereas like maybe North Face or something, or like Patagonia maybe, they're like a bigger company with like more like managers, and you got to go through this to kind of see what they're doing, and then you won't see it until like a certain time frame. So it's there's like pros and cons to kind of both approaches, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I have some friends that work at the North Face. I have friends that work in a bunch of other brands. And once you get to that size, right? And again, nothing against them. They've reached this much larger scale. And you kind of need these necessary hierarchies at that point. And in the corporate world, they tend to call them silos, where everybody's in their own silo and they don't really talk to each other. Even when I was at Vail, it was kind of a siloed work experience, just because it's the scale. Like when I was at Vail, there are 25,000 people that work there. So how do you manage a giant organization like that? And anytime you want it, our CEO at Vail talked about it being kind of this cruise ship, right? So like, if you want to turn a big company like a Vail or like a North Face, you kind of have to start executing that turn now, and then the ship will turn 3 years later. Where at a company like Matador, we're so small and so nimble. I should say, small team, large brand, I hope, but small team that we can be nimble, right? Like we can turn the wheel right now if we want to. So yeah, I mean, you kind of have to, be smart about still when you're going to turn that wheel. But that is one of the advantages of kind of where we find ourselves in the marketplace is we're able to take advantage of kind of those nimble turns where other organizations, just by the nature of their size and scale, maybe don't have those opportunities.
Cool. And in the fashion industry, there are, for these usually like for the year, there's like a trend, like if it's a color or it's a type of product, right? Or like a style of like apparel that everyone kind of all goes into. What is that like for kind of the outdoor or like travel industry? Is there any trends that like brands follow, or is it just kind of like, is that just specific for like the fashion industry?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think anytime you're making a product or gear, if you want to call it that, there are these trends that you want to look to, right? You have to be careful, it depends on the product, right?
Hmm.
So you mentioned fashion, right? So when I hear fashion, I start thinking of apparel. I think of shirts and
Yeah.
pants and all these things, right? The life cycle and the useful life of a t-shirt is what? I don't know. I mean, depends. It could be a long time if you take care
Right.
of it, I suppose. But I think the customers' expectations are like if they get like a year or two out of that, or less out of a shirt, right? Or they're going to buy a pair of pants, and if like that style goes away next year, okay, right? That's like kind
Right.
of the expectation. But when you start getting into gear that folks kind of have a relationship with, right? If you think about a pack, right? If you think about a travel pack, the hope that you're gonna spend, whatever, $200-300 or more on a travel pack, and you want that thing to last a long time. I mean, potentially, 5-10 years, whatever it is, if you take care of it, right? So as a product, I'm not a designer, but as a marketer, you have to make these products appealing for not just the right now. There's a goal of you certainly want to get someone to be excited about this pack now and be excited about this pack now. But you also want them to be excited about it in 5 years when they still
Hmm.
have it and they're still excited to take care of it, still excited to tell their friends how awesome this pack is, right? So you have to be very careful with following some of those trends, right? But I think there's all sorts of data out there that folks in kind of the product design, product development, and marketing space. We definitely follow all this. We get all this trend data. There's brands out there that are predicting, what are the trends in fashion, in all these other things that they can look to, in whenever, I don't know, maybe 2026 is probably the next year that these companies do these big, they'll say like, hey, here are our predictions for fashion for 2026.
Hmm.
And it's not just apparel, it's not just like pack companies that look at this data. I mean, car companies have access to this stuff. Folks that are making household goods have access to this stuff. So there are these there's many companies out there that are kind of aggregating and sort of trying to predict what's going to be cool in the future. And brands like us will kind of look and see what is trending, right? So we'll do, I'm sitting in a room right now, and there's this huge kind of trend analysis that the design team has done, where we say, what patterns are interesting right now. What patterns do we think will be interesting next year based on some of the data that's out there? What colors are interesting right now? What design elements are things, are things gravitating toward a more rounded look? Are things going to more industrial, even in architecture and all these things, right? There's so many things, again, back to inspiration. You can get so much inspiration from different areas outside of just your space. So I think that's kind of a big piece of it, right? How do you use patterns and color to kind of enhance that attractiveness of the product? I mean, the travel industry is interesting because I would encourage you and your listeners to pay attention next time they're walking through any airport, right? I would imagine 70, 80, 90% of the luggage or the travel packs that you see are probably black.
Yeah.
And they're, for whatever reason, folks that are doing all sorts of different kinds of travel have tended to gravitate toward these more kind of colors that are a bit more long term, right? That aren't as fashion forward, that are a bit more kind of have like a long term aesthetic to them. So I would say that black is pretty easy, right? Like we make a lot of items that black is usually, if we're going to come out with a new product, it's probably going to be black, right? And then we'll tiptoe into another color or two. But black is usually the most popular. So it's like that is kind of this truth that is independent of current trends, right? So I would say that there's always these like go-to things that kind of a brand kind of sticks to. We're kind of known for simplicity or elegance or this kind of for black, right? Like I would say that a lot of our branding includes black or white or both. A lot of our packs are primarily black. So it's like, how do you, we're always going to have that, but then how do we play with other color, right? What other color trends do we feel like are on brand do we feel like Matador? So I think the team is always excited to kind of play with what's next out there, but still doing it in kind of a safe way. And yeah, there's a few different approaches, but fashion is definitely an influence one way or another, not just in color, but in features and little design elements too.
Gotcha. Interesting insight. So now we're going to shift back to you, Kyle. I'd love to hear a little bit of what your own favorite product from Matador is, and maybe some secret gear hacks that you used for some of the Matador products or even non-Matador products.
Yeah. So I will tell you, I talked a lot about the Beta Lock. I should probably tell the folks about more products, but I'm real fired up about the Beta Lock this week. I will say that what I love the most about our products is, especially the accessories, is some of the versatility that the team has baked into some of this stuff. So the Beta Lock, yes, it's a locking carabiner, and I was talking to, we were at a trade show this summer, and I was telling someone how it's very difficult to show the Beta Lock in a lifestyle photo, right? In a photo of it out in the world. Because it has 20, 30 uses, right? I could show someone taking the Beta Lock and their travel pack and hooking it to the peg of their bed while they're at a hostel in Denmark or something, right? That's one use case, right? I could show the carabiner with hooked to someone's climbing helmet while they're like hiking up to go do some sort of outdoor adventure, right? But that's just one of many use cases. So I will say that we do. So we have a ski area that's just located, 30 minutes from our office. So more than a few times a year, we will take the team up there. We'll pop down in one of their rooms and we'll kind of, do a work from the ski area day. While we were up there, someone showed me that I could use the Beta Lock to lock my snowboard to the rack outside. And I was like, I would have never thought that is a use case, right? We actually make this accessory cable that you can use with the Beta Lock, so you can kind of weave it and wrap it around, whatever gear you're using, a snowboard in this case. And then I just locked it right to the ski rack. So I can leave it there and, go in and hang out at lunch and, not worry about anyone's, grabbing my snowboard and trying to walk away with it. So that is this kind of like really unexpected use case that I would have for that product in particular. And, it's the reviews that we get on this product are pretty fascinating. People just talk about like how they used it to lock their motorcycle helmet to their bike, while they went into the grocery store. There's just 1,000,001 kind of use cases for that product in particular. So I think the team is really smart about how they design these things. So folks can kind of use it for their own needs, right? It's one thing to say like, this is this product, its use is this, right? And that's fine. but it's also really nice to have some product options where someone can kind of choose their own adventure, right? Choose their own way to kind of experience it and use it and find value from it.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe briefly we spoke about maybe you can help me out here, um, a travel philosophy, a 1.5 bag approach.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's look into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I love this concept. So there's kind of this idea out there, and you might have spoken about it on your podcast before. But this idea of one bag travel, right?
Mhm.
This is kind of a concept that exists in the travel space, right? So if you go on to like Reddit, there's a whole thread on one bag travel and everyone's
Right.
tips and here's how to do it more efficiently and what do you do how do you what's your footwear technique, right? Because you can't people are like, yeah, you wear your largest shoes through the airport so you can
Right.
pack all your smaller shoes into your bag, so you wear your hiking boots through the airport, right? There's all these little
Right.
hacks and stuff that people kind of do out there to help achieve this sort of efficient explorer kind of one bag travel scenario. And that's great. The way the Matador ecosystem, we kind of build the products around this like ecosystem philosophy, right? So we don't necessarily call it one bag travel, although you could. We kind of gravitate toward this 1.5 bag travel, right? So my example, so I always use Japan. I have a trip planned in January, so it's on my mind. But say someone is going to Japan, excuse me, and they're going to land in Tokyo. They're going to spend a few days in Tokyo, but they also want to hike Mount Fuji while they're there. It's like this dream for them to do this big epic Mount Fuji hike at sunrise, right? Um, and from there, maybe you're going to go down to like Kyoto and get some, check out the temples, have this cultural kind of experience of old world Japan, right? And then from there, maybe you're going to travel down to like Osaka, or even further south to some of the beaches in Japan, and have kind of a beach part of your vacation or your travel experience. So imagine that's the trip, right? But you want to do this efficiently, right? You don't want to be wheeling this roller bag everywhere you go, right? Like it doesn't really make sense
Mhm.
uh, to carry your roller bag throughout Tokyo, throughout the temples, right? Just imagine how awkward and cumbersome that would be. But this 1.5 bag travel, that's kind of Matador's bread and butter. So it's where we're making travel accessories and packable packs. That's the 0.5, as well as the large travel packs. So we make all of these different products that you could throw into your larger travel pack. So you could do Mount Fuji, right? You can leave your large travel pack at your Airbnb or your hotel or your hostel, and then grab that packable day pack, throw that on your back, and hike Mount Fuji, right? And then you come back, and you pack up that bag, throw it into your main pack, and then you're off to Kyoto for the rest of the trip and south. So that whole 1.5 bag travel, I think, is a much more realistic way to talk about this concept of like efficient exploration. We like to kind of lean into, because it's so convenient to have that extra packable bag, that point
Mhm.
0.5, so you can do these day trips a bit more. You can be a little bit more nimble on these day trips, and you don't have to carry around your big pack for every single part of the trip. Although you could, if you really wanted to.
Yeah, if you really want to.
If you want to.
Yeah. All right, so we're kind of reaching towards the end of the podcast. Usually, I kind of like to do, well, recently, I like to do a kind of like a rapid fire question that don't necessarily have to do with the brand itself, but more like to yourself. So we'll start with the first one. So, if you could bring only 3 items onto a desert island, what would they be?
Sure.
Naked and afraid.
No, that's good. Um, I would bring some sort of access to music. So whether it's like, an old school iPod or something with like Spotify access or something.
Gotcha.
I would have to have music on the desert island.
Yeah.
I would bring I bring my wife.
Yeah.
That's for sure. That just
Oh.
sounds like a fun little beach vacation. Yeah, I think I'm fortunate enough to just have a really really fun time just hanging out with my wife.
Gotcha.
Chilling at home. Even so, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
And then number three
Number
would
three.
be, that's a good question. A water bottle.
A water bottle.
Yeah, and it's because usually I don't go anywhere without my water bottle. It's a little
Matador
security.
one.
Exactly. Yeah. It's become this little security blanket, right? I always have water. I always have hydration. I'm always doing stuff where you build up this big thirst. So having a water bottle and easy access to water sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really good idea. H2O and hydration is good.
Exactly.
What's the most adventurous trip that you've ever taken?
Ooh. So since we don't have a ton of time, I'll give you the short story. But in 2017, my wife and I went to we did my first trip to Europe. So my wife had been, but I wanted to kind of do everything, right? I wanted to sample the entire continent as much as possible, which was pretty aggressive. There's a lot. Turns out there's a lot to see. And so we went to we did this big loop around. We started in Iceland and then did this big loop around kind of the middle part of like Scandinavia down to Italy, France, and then back up to the UK. Right. So as part of this trip, I knew I was going to propose to my wife, and she'll be stoked that she came up twice in the podcast. So I knew I was going to propose, and there's this epic hike. I would encourage folks to check this out. It's called Trolltunga.
Oh,
yeah. So this is it's this like really cool overlook in kind of south central Norway, and it's it's like a 4-hour drive, and then you have to do essentially a 20-mile hike in and out to get to this spot. Mm-hmm. And this trip, so that part of everything else was very curated. The whole European trip, we were there for almost a month, but we were in Norway for 7 days. We were kind of doing a bit more of the nice Airbnbs and all that kind of stuff. But this part of the trip to go to Trolltunga, this big hike, absolutely made no sense with our itinerary. Okay. And my wife was like, so I had 50 pounds of camping gear. I had its own bag. I had I had all this extra stuff that just didn't really make sense. My wife was like, you want to have this camping gear for like 24 hours and we're going to lug it around Europe for a month just so you can do this. And I was like, oh yeah, trust me, it's worth it. Meanwhile, the whole time I was like, I need this stuff because I'm going to propose. This is a big deal, right? My wife was like, she definitely knew something was up. She was like, this doesn't make any sense. Why are you so motivated to do this gnarly, long hike in the middle of our trip that's mostly relaxing and, cultural, all that kind of stuff. But it was one of those scenarios where, we camped at midnight and it was still light out in Norway. This was in August. And then, we got up super early in the morning and then it was raining and storming and it was just crazy. And it was, the weather was intense. And I was like, I got to figure out a backup scenario as we're hiking, getting closer to the spot. Yeah. And then it was one of those scenarios where I'm not even like lying. I'm not even overemphasizing it. Like the clouds parted, the sun came out when it was
angels started singing. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it was just kind of a meant to be moment. And, we kind of got out on this big rock and, I did the thing. And it was just this like really epic, amazing experience. I got this really, photography is a big hobby of mine. So I got this really amazing photo of the moment. Nice. And it was just this like incredibly epic, exciting adventure. And then she was like, oh, that's why we did this, right? Like, now I know why you wanted to lug this 50 pounds of extra gear around Europe. Like now it's worth it. It makes sense.
Yeah. And then you had to continue lugging it around.
And then I had to actually we found like a FedEx in Oslo and shipped it back to the US because I was like, I'm not taking it anymore.
That's the smart thing too.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. What a story.
Yeah, right.
You should let your wife listen to this podcast, but don't let my wife listen to this podcast because then she'll be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tough. It's a tough act to follow. I know that.
Yeah. And then the last rapid fire question is: if Matador could collaborate with any brand in the world, from a marketing perspective, which one would you like it to be and why?
That's a good question. You're putting me on the spot. I would say, well, it's a brand that's just near and dear to my heart, and we've done a collab with them before. But I would love to do another one. So, and I'm wearing the shirt today. So I'm wearing a Volcom shirt. So I tend to gravitate to more the skate, snowboard kind of vibe to like that attire, right? And we did a collab with them a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, using some of the really unique patterns and other kind of design principles that they've been well known for over the years. We took those to some packable beach towels, a packable poncho, some other products that were kind of a little bit in the line, but we modified. So I would say that, that product was incredibly successful. You know, it allowed them access to our customer base. We got more access to their customer base. I was actually at a concert. Red Rocks is a big venue here in Denver. It's this outdoor amphitheater. I was at a concert a few weeks ago, and we got there early so we could kind of claim our spot. And my buddy, like out of his bag, pops out this little folded thing, and he opens it up, and it's the Volcom branded beach towel that we made 3 years ago before I even worked here. And he laid it all out, and we had a spot for all 4 of us to kind of sit and claim our spot for the show. And the pattern was just really cool and really, really interesting. And so personally, I gravitate towards some of that surf, skate, snow culture. And there's certainly some overlap with the travel space too, right? Those folks travel. My buddy who's in Tokyo right now was skating around on his Instagram story I saw yesterday. So there's a lot of overlaps with kind of these worlds. So I would love to do another collab with Volcom or a brand that's kind of similar in that space.
Okay, like a packable skateboard. Got it.
Packable skateboard. Sure, let's do it. Let's sign it.
All right, man. Kyle, thank you for taking the time to answer a bunch of questions that I had and the listeners were interested in. If people, I'm sure people already know, but like if you want to direct people to Matador or even to yourself, where do you want people to go check you guys out?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to check out Matador, it's matadorequipment.com. That is us. You can find all sorts of content on there. Shoppable, products. We make, 70 different SKUs that folks can kind of check out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Matador Equipment. So another great place to kind of connect with the brand one-to-one, to follow our content, check things out. And if you want to, make friends with me, I'm open to that too. You can find me on LinkedIn at Kyle Ogilvie. So be happy to connect with anybody. And I love networking and making friends with folks in our space and other spaces. So lots of opportunity to connect with the brand and with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, Kyle, thank you for coming on again. And it was really cool and insightful just to hear from the marketing point of view for a brand like this. Again, we hope to see you on maybe talking about something else. But for now, thank you. And we hope to see you again.
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, great chatting with you, Edward. Loved it. Hope we can do it again.
All right. Thank you. Peace.
Cool.